How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendon and Sterling here, getting ready for week number 6 here in the world of the NFL. But first, Sterling, how you doing today, my friend?
Man, I'm fucking good. I'm team one going into a bye week. I'm on a three-game winning streak in our football fantasy league. I seem to be dominating in week one of our hockey fantasy league. So shit's good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Obviously, your first win, you were able to get that on my team, giving me my first ever loss in the league. Um, Doing fairly well in the hockey one too. Obviously, for you in the hockey, you got Connor McDavid, so that's always going to be a kind of a league winner type situation. But man, I'm looking forward to some good football this weekend. Obviously, a bunch of good college football games on here today. One of the games I'm really looking forward to is that Oregon Washington game. That one is going to be unbelievable. Fortunately, I'm not going to be able to watch a ton of it because fortunately I got to have that real life thing and, do that job and go work but at least I get to do job in world of speaky as I struggle to get all those words out. So it doesn't make it seem like I'm actually a part of that world, but yes it is indeed I am. But again, we thank you all for joining us here. But as per usual, we like to get into kind of a little bit of our predictions and picks for the opening start. But first, taking a look back at that Thursday night football game where we saw the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Denver Donkeys. And, again, another Taylor Swift filled night. Neither of us were actually able to sit down and watch it because we were both at work. Um, I was calling a hockey game and you were at your particular job, and so just looking at the box score, 19-8. KC just really hasn't been getting their offense moving to that same way. It's that Matt Nagy effect. Chicago Bears fans are sitting back going, "Yes, ruin someone else's offense. Why don't you?" And we're like, "We told you, we told you."
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily the Matt Nagy effect. It's more the we don't have a wide receiver effect.
That is
You know,
very true.
that's the issue they're going through. Because I know I was watching this game right up until on my phone I was watching to see if Travis Kelce was going to play because he was questionable all the way up to it, and like even that 45 minutes before kickoff, they hadn't taken that questionable designation off of him, and I was like, fuck. I was trying to tease you earlier in the week, trying to see if I could sway Dallas Goddard away from me for my fantasy team because without Kelsey, I had nothing
Yep.
in that tight end spot. But luckily, he played and he played well. 9 receptions for I think 140 some
120,
yards,
124
120
yards.
yards. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that ankle he came up limping a couple of times, so it's obviously going to be a bit of a nagging problem for him. But they have 10 days now until their next game, so some more time for him to heal that up. Outside of that Mahomes Kelsey connection though, that KC offense has been struggling for sure.
Yeah.
Trying to find somebody to step up. A lot of people thought maybe it was going to be Kadarius Toney, and he just hasn't really shown that. I think he got his first touchdown on Thursday, his first receiving touchdown, but that's it for him so far this year. People thought maybe Sky Moore was going to take off. I know I took him with the one of my last picks in our draft. He's already long gone from my team. But yeah, they got to figure something out. We're coming up on the trade deadline in 2 weeks here, so I wouldn't be shocked to see Kansas City make some kind of a move to bring a wide receiver in just to solidify that offense a little more.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably get into a little bit of trade talk here today, but as we get closer to the trade deadline, a trade that right now that I've kind of penciled in for a couple of weeks here at the moment is obviously you're looking at the Minnesota Vikings, which is a team that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and they're a team where Justin Jefferson is coming up for a contract, Kirk Cousins is coming up for a contract. This is a team that right now looks like they could be in a full swing of a rebuild just because this was kind of their make it or break it year for them in Minnesota. But I could see the Kansas City Chiefs going out there and saying, listen, hey, Minnesota, we're willing to give you 2 first round picks for Justin Jefferson and allow you to kind of have that. And then KC goes out there, pays Justin Jefferson, and like if you're Minnesota, like how do you not say no to that? You just drafted a young wide receiver in Jordan Addison in the first round who looks like he could be very, very good and very talented moving forward. But again, with Justin Jefferson, he's going to command you a lot of capital. Do I think it's just going to solely be just the two first round picks? Probably not. But I think KC, they're looking at it going, you know what, we already have the best quarterback in football. We have the best tight end in football. If we can get the best wide receiver in football, adding him to that offense where you already have the best offensive play caller in football in Andy Reid, like how do you stop that team that is already seemingly unstoppable? You just kind of go back to that moment of going, man, if Mahomes somehow gets Justin Jefferson, what do you do?
Yeah, that makes them pretty near unstoppable on offense at that point because they've shown it before. They don't need a lot of extra weapons. They really just need one marquee wide receiver. We saw that with Tyreek Hill. We saw they used a 1-2 punch last year where some weeks Smith Schuster was doing well, some weeks Valdez Scantling, and for some reason Scantling's just sort of fallen off this year a little bit.
He
Where he had the opportunity to really elevate him to be that number one, and he just hasn't been able to take that.
Yeah, I it's really unfortunate for him because like he looked like he could have been that guy, but just unfortunately this year the KC Chiefs, I think we were probably a year too early on the whole, oh, the Chiefs are going to start to fall back a little bit on offense just because obviously they traded Tyreek Hill away and they didn't really bring in anyone of super note other than Juju Smith-Schuster, but they ultimately
Hmm.
said to him, please leave us after this
Yeah.
year. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we'll get into more trade speculation probably likely next week, just when we do a little bit more on that. It's still just a little bit too early. Week 7 is kind of when all that juicy drama and
Hmm.
trade talk really starts to heat up. But now I'm going
Really,
into
Monday after this week is
yeah,
when I think it's going to start heating up. Because it depends how some of these poor teams perform, and if they continue losing, we're going to start seeing a lot of that trade bait start popping up.
without a doubt. And now moving
Hmm.
into our first game of the week, where we have the Baltimore Ravens heading into London to take on the Tennessee Titans. I was going to say Tennessee, but then I saw the time saying 7 a.m. for us here. But going into London, these two teams going
Hmm.
out there, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, and I was listening to, I forget who I was listening to, but they said, if you're just looking at Lamar Jackson right now, he is on the precipice to have a historic year in terms of just himself, where he's on pace to throw for 4,500 yards, get something like 30 plus touchdown receptions, and you're sitting back going, but even then, it still doesn't feel like he's even doing all that much. Which is weird to
Hmm.
say, to look at a quarterback going, oh, he's on pace for this, but you're like, it could be a lot more. And but that's a whole different conversation. But playing against Tennessee in London, both of these teams are going to be out there for this week and going up against each other, as we have this little lovely horn blasting in your background. But Sterling, give us your take on this game, my friend.
This was a really tough one to pick. I don't like picking the London games because, unless it's the Jags playing because it's like their second home, so they've really got more of an advantage. And this is difficult because the win really came out of the sails for both of these teams last week. They both lost big divisional games. The Ravens losing to the Steelers, the Titans losing to the Colts, and it's hard to tell which one is going to bounce back. Lamar Jackson, yeah, he's looking good statistically, but this wide receiver core that they brought in and they're like, oh, he's finally got some weapons. They had a lot of drops last week. And that's a concern going over into London because you've got that jet lag issue. These guys are going to be more tired, and they're usually not as crisp and as clean. So this is really going to come down to a defensive battle and whether or not Derrick Henry is able to get off the ball and get some running yards. If Derrick Henry can show up, then the Ravens are going to have a tough time. You know, it's Derrick Henry against Roquan Smith. You know, who's going to break first? And, you know, luckily for the Ravens, Smith is a little younger, and so I think he's going to have that bit of an edge, but it's man, this was a really hard one for me to pick. Ultimately, I am going to go with the Ravens just because outside of Derrick Henry, there's not a lot of real scoring that I can see coming from the Tennessee Titans. And if this comes down to a battle of kickers, the Ravens got Justin Tucker, you know, and he could very well put on a show in London for those fans. And I think the Ravens will pull out a win. I think it's going to be an ugly game, though. You know, it'll if it ends up being high scoring, it's going to be because of just terribly blown up, broken plays.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This one I kind of looked at and I went, I have a lot more faith in Lamar Jackson than I do Ryan Tannehill and their offense, which is one of the things. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins kind of had his breakout game for Tennessee last week with 140 receiving yards, but I think this Baltimore defense is just a lot better than Tennessee's offense, and I think Baltimore's offense is better than Tennessee's defense, and I think that's going to be the thing. And going back to what you're saying, Justin Tucker, he's going out to the land of
Hmm.
kicking and, you know, football essentially.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to say like, hey, Americans can do this stuff too. And
Hmm.
but yeah, I have the Baltimore Ravens winning this one, so I think you and I are both in agreement. But again, these
Yeah,
seven,
it hurt to pick them for me because I'm at the point now with where my team's at after that win going into the bye. We're sitting in first. I want the Ravens to lose. So I hope to God we're both wrong. I hope the Titans upset the Ravens and pull out a win here. But I think
yeah, it's gonna
going
be
logically, the Ravens should win.
it's going to be interesting to say the least. But now moving over to Washington, heading into Atlanta after having their mini bye after giving the Chicago Bears, my Chicago Bears, their first victory of the year. And for me, this was kind of one of those tougher games because Atlanta at times has looked pretty good. But then there's also
Hmm.
been times where they've looked really, really bad. And Washington at times has looked good, but they've also looked horrifically bad. And that Thursday night game against the Bears, they they looked at the worst team in football at that point and said, "We're gonna make you look like the Kansas City Chiefs. We're gonna make you
The,
look good." And like the entire game, I'm sitting there going like, "This is a very weird feeling." Something that I haven't felt in a long time while watching my team, where they just go out there and dominate, and it wasn't even like a pretty domination either. It was just the Commanders were so bad on the offensive side of the ball that they made one of the worst defenses in football look competent. But
hmm
I right now I'm going to pick Atlanta. I like their run game. Obviously, they're at home. Bijan Robinson, he looks like he's a top. I was gonna say top three. I'm not sure I'm ready to give him top three back. Definitely top five running back in the NFL right now, and he's just looked so good. And I think Atlanta's gonna squeak out kind of a weak victory here against the Commanders.
See, and I agree with you and I disagree with you. This is a tale of two teams trending in opposite directions. The Commanders started the season looking hot, and they've started falling off, whereas the Falcons started a little slower, and they have been building. And the thing with Ritter and the Falcons is at this point, Ritter is undefeated at home, but he's winless on the road. That is their issue. Is at home, they are playing very good football. And after that loss to the Jags in London, they bounced back, which surprised me. I thought they were going to have a little bit of lag going, but they looked good. They finally got Kyle Pitts involved last week as well, which is a dangerous aspect. If they can have Pitts, London, and Robinson all going off, that makes Ritter's life so much easier. And I think we see them continue trending in this week at home against a struggling Commanders team that just, you know, got upset by the Bears. They've
Yeah,
had
they
a
did.
couple of tough losses this year already. I don't think it's going to be as close as you think it will. I think this is going to be a statement game for the Falcons to sort of say to the Saints and the Bucks, "Hey, we're in your rearview mirror, and you better watch out for us for the rest of this season because we want to give you a fight for that division title.
Yep,
But
fair enough.
Falcons will win this game.
Yeah, so you and I are both in agreements on this one. We
Mhm.
both think the Falcons.
Yeah,
Now
it was
moving
just
over,
easier decision for me.
easy for
Yeah.
for me. I when I say it was a little bit more of a difficult decision, it's more of one of those ones where I had to sit there for probably a good 30 seconds, going like mulling it over in my mind, as opposed to going, yes, this team, type
Hmm.
situation.
Yeah, see, whereas I scrolled across it and I saw Atlanta Falcons at home, Washington Commanders, Falcons win.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
But now moving over to what I think, kind of what we were talking about in the pre for this, as one of the trickiest games to pick of the week, where we see the Minnesota Vikings coming into Chicago to take on the Bears.
The battle for the basement in the NFC North. Who's gonna end up, losing this division completely. This was so hard to pick because the Bears, as we discussed last week, throughout all those losses up until the Commanders game, they were showing flashes here and there. And last week they finally started to put some drives together, and we saw some cohesion. The downside is they're going into this week with a running back who has been on the practice squad all season. Khalil Herbert is out. I can't remember who else is out, but
Roshan
they're
Johnson,
run
Travis
yeah,
Homer. We
and
have
so they're
five
running with
guys in our
Dante
running
Foreman.
back room. We have five guys in
Hmm.
the running back room, and only two of them are actually active.
Right? And neither of them have seen a snap yet this year, as far as I recall. So it,
Foreman
it
played
looks
in
like
week one, but ever since then
did he?
yeah, he was in
Okay.
for week one. He got a couple of snaps, but ever since then it's been
Yeah.
Herbert and
And
Johnson.
so Dante Foreman is their number one running back going into this week. So that is going to make it difficult because really this Vikings defense is going to be able to focus a little bit more on Justin Fields, I think, and that could make for a very messy day for Fields. But on the other side of it, the Vikings cannot seem to hold on to the ball and win a game. They fumble every chance they get. They fumble the game, they fumble the ball, they fumble every opportunity, despite having the, I believe, statistical best quarterback so far this year. He's got more touchdowns than anybody else up to this point. Granted, he now is also losing his number one weapon in Justin Jefferson. However, Jordan Addison's right there, and he has shown some flashes of talent and could just step into that role. And we may see Kirk Cousins still putting up 400 yards and 3 touchdowns in a loss. But I went back and forth on this one, and I just as much as the Bears managed to pull out a win last week, I think the Vikings might still have the number, and I'm gonna go with the Vikings. But I'm not super confident in that pick. Whichever one of these teams loses, I believe is going to be entering fire sale mode come trade deadline.
Yeah, it could very easily be. And for me right now, going into this game, obviously, Minnesota putting Justin Jefferson on the IR, so he's out for a minimum of the next 4 weeks. And then, but yeah, Jordan Addison, he was my favorite wide receiver in the draft this year.
Hmm.
And I looked at him and went like, man, oh man, like he is, like when they signed or when they drafted him, I was like, this is gonna be scary. He's shown flashes. He's not that guy yet.
No.
Obviously T.J. Hawkinson, who has kind of been a little bit slower than most people would hope. Um,
Hmm.
with Justin Jefferson out, he's going to be a big target in this game. But the weather in Chicago is looking incredibly rainy, incredibly windy. So it's one of those things where it's, the running game is going to be tough. And the one thing that we've seen from Deontay Foreman is last year when obviously Carolina traded away Christian McCaffrey, the Panthers looked at Deontay Foreman and said, "Hey, we're gonna give you the ropes this year, and we're just gonna kind of see what you're gonna be able to do." And then he was statistically one of the most productive running backs. He had 1,000, or it was either he had 1,000 yards or almost 1,000 yards in 8 games played. So this is a guy who thrives off coming off the bench. He's not gonna give you
Hmm.
those flashy, like, big, massive 20-yard runs. He's just going to be a guy that's going to consistently get you 4 or 5 yards, which is something that you need. And in a game where it's going to be sloppy weather, the Bears come out and play those games a lot harder. And I think the
Mm.
Chicago Bears offense is going to be a little bit better suited in a game like this. And the big thing is the Bears are getting 3 of their 4 starters back in their secondary. Jalen Johnson is coming back. Kyler Gordon is also going to be back. Eddie Jackson is a questionable decision, but if they can get him back, that's going to be huge. But just getting Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon back is massive for this team. I am worried about the run game, but with Justin Fields, we haven't seen him break out in that running game yet so far this year, and it's just a matter of time before he finally gets one of those 100+ yard rushing games. And that, this game against the Vikings could very easily be one of them. And I think I'm giving the Bears to win this one, but it's going to be probably a fairly high scoring game that's going to be decided by 1 or 2 points.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? That weather report you gave me, that swayed my decision for sure. If it's going to be wet, sloppy weather, then I'm going Bears all the way to win that game, not Vikings.
Yeah, and like that
Yeah.
that's been one of the questions of the week is they see the forecast and
Hmm.
they're like, ugh, like okay. But yeah,
Hmm.
for me, I just think the weather is ultimately going to help Chicago just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And but now moving
Yeah.
over
We
to
talk
the,
about these. Yeah, we talk about these flip-floppy games sometimes, and you have swayed me on that one for sure. Talking about how Dante Foreman comes in off the bench and the sloppy weather. Yeah, yeah, I am gonna change my pick to the Bears.
yeah, now moving forward to the Seattle Seahawks going into Cincinnati to take on the Bengals.
Um, I mean, last week it looked like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase were back. We knew it was only a matter of time. We saw Joe Burrow break out of the pocket and run a few times without coming up limping. So I think, knock on wood, it's safe to say that calf is finally healed up for Joe Burrow, which means it is the sky's the limit for the Cincinnati Bengals at this point. Um, I don't know if they're going to put up, Jamar Chase getting 3 touchdowns and, well over 100 yards again, but I think they will fairly easily handle this Seahawks team and put the rest of the AFC on notice that, hey, we might have started 1-3, but we're back and we are coming. And Bengals will win this game.
See, this was a little bit of a tougher game for me because obviously the Bengals last week, they looked like they were kind of coming back into form, but it was against the Arizona Cardinals. And, again, that team has been fighting a lot better this year, more so than what we thought. And I think this game against Seattle is going to be a pretty tricky one because Seattle's playing good ball. They're
Mm-hmm.
looking like a really good team. Um, I know anyone who's watched this channel for a decent amount or followed us in our conversations, they know I'm a massive Joe Burrow fan, and I really am. He's probably my favorite player in the NFL right now. I think the Seahawks are just going to be a little too much, and I think next week is when the Bengals they look at the Seahawks game and go, okay, the training wheels are off and this is where we just go on our run. But I think the Seahawks are going to take this one just because they've just been a little bit more of the more consistent team as of late.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's going to be that's going to be my decision for that one. But then moving over to what was probably one of the easiest games to pick in the week, where we have the San Francisco 49ers going into Cleveland to take on the Browns, who do not again have Deshaun Watson in at quarterback. So how quickly did you choose San Francisco to win this game?
Pretty damn quick.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. This was a no-brainer. I mean, I'm kind of hoping the Niners go in there and destroy the Browns even worse than they destroyed my Steelers in week 1. And, without Deshaun Watson, with or without him, because honestly, even when he's been in this year, sure, he's looked good at times, but he has made some bad decisions You
Yes.
know, he's not the same guy. As I said at the start of the year, he is not the same quarterback as he was when he played his last game in Houston. And I don't think he is ever going to regain that form, unfortunately for him. You know, and it that this should be an easy game for the 49ers. I think the toughest part for them is going to be making sure to get guys like Christian McCaffrey off the field once the game is locked up, because I've been hearing rumors that Christian McCaffrey has been willfully ignoring subs because he wants to stay in that game. And it's just, if he's going to get hurt, it's going to be against a team like the Cleveland Browns, who like to throw some dirty hits here and there.
Well, and a team that right now has nothing to lose. They have their
Right.
starting quarterback out. They have, they just haven't looked
Mm-hmm.
great. They have PJ Walker, who is going to be their starting quarterback this week. And if for fan or people listening in at home right now, and they're going, well, who are you going to pick, Brendon? Well, it's the 49ers. I don't think that's going to be much of a shock at all. But yeah, with the way that Brock Purdy has played, and again, we don't really talk a lot about him. You know, I most the discussion a lot this week, I've heard throughout a lot of the sports media world, is Brock Purdy an elite quarterback? Which I don't think either of us think he is. It's just one of those things where he's an above average quarterback playing in a system that is so friendly and so good and has
Mm-hmm.
so much talent. Or it's like, man, like how do you not have him as a top 5 quarterback right now just because of the situation that he's in and just the way that he's been playing and producing. But yeah, I think this is a pretty easy San Francisco 49ers win. Another game that was pretty much an instant lockup pick is the Carolina Panthers heading into Miami to take on the Dolphins. And for me, the entirety of the year, I'm going to be a hater for the Carolina Panthers, obviously because the Chicago Bears have their number one pick or have their first round pick, and currently that is number one overall. And that pick right now is probably the most valuable pick in
Mm-hmm.
the last 10 years probably for a first overall pick. And but the way that Miami has been playing, again, they stumbled a little bit with Buffalo. They didn't have a great game, but this is one of those teams where you looked at them and said they're probably, a 4-loss team this year, and they just went up against Buffalo and they had that situation. But Miami, this could be potentially one of those games where it's a trap game, but I think Miami looks at it and goes, okay, we just need to try to get ourselves back into form the way that we have been playing. And this is one of those games where we can just look at Carolina and just maybe not put up a 70 burger, but definitely throw up some high points. And maybe McDaniel has an opportunity to throw Chase Claypool out there and see what happens. And, I'm
The
just
vending machine.
the vending machine as
I'm still not sure if that was a compliment or an insult. I can't figure out what the hell Tyreek Hill meant by that.
it's just one of those things where he said, "Oh, he's like a vending machine." It's like like
He's
like
big, bulky, and in the way? Like what? Like what the Oh,
like
that guy says so many things that you're just like, where the hell did that come from and what the hell do you mean?
what it's like what do you throw change at him and stuff comes out of him? Like I don't know if that's the way that you want to proceed your new teammate who on his last two teams has stirred up quite a bit of drama, but who knows? Again, when I heard that, I was like, what is he trying to make out of this comment?
Right?
Like,
Yeah, that was a very bizarre one for sure.
yeah,
But yeah, I agree. This should be an easy Dolphins win. I'm kind of hoping it's not at 70 pointer because, I picked up this Dolphins defense streaming for this week for my fantasy team. So I'm kind of hoping that, they tear up the Panthers, but they don't give them too many opportunities to get some garbage points late. That's what I'm sort of looking for is, just play a nice clean game, start really honing your defense. They should be getting Jalen Ramsey back pretty soon in what, 2, 3, 4 weeks, somewhere like that.
that is a
Because I heard
very
it was
good
supposed to be
question.
somewhere around trade deadline week 10, right in that range where he was supposed to be back. So that will be a big boon for the Dolphins once he's back. Either way, though, yeah, this Panthers team just has not given us much to talk about in a positive note. Bryce Young has probably been the biggest letdown of the draft so far this year. When you look at guys like CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, what they've been able to do with their teams. Richardson, of course, being out now. We'll talk about that later. Uh, I just there's no faith in this Panthers team to win. Like every week I see them, I start leaning more and more toward, man, this could be an 0-17 team. If they don't catch a break somewhere, they could go winless this year, which is just it's crazy to think about. But that'll be great for your Bears until draft time comes and Poles goes, fuck, what do I do with this pick?
Yeah, and that'll be something that we talk a little bit about later, because it is
Yeah,
going to
that'll be
be a
late in it.
discussion
Mhm.
for later down the podcast, just because it is a very tough decision. But ultimately, I kind of have my opinion on it. But
Mhm.
yeah, both of us picking Miami. I don't think we've actually had a different. No, wait, we had the Seattle Cincinnati. That was our only different pick here
Yeah.
thus far. But now moving Indianapolis, going down to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. And this was an interesting game because the Colts this year have looked a lot better than what I think a lot of us expected. Obviously, Anthony Richardson is out, and he's now
Mhm.
injured for the third time this year, but the most significant one to his throwing shoulder. And this was kind of one of the worries for Anthony Richardson coming into the year, where he was just going to throw his body to the wind and just say, I'm going to play with reckless abandonment. And it's coming back to bite him. But the Colts are still finding ways to get wins, and
Mhm.
this Jacksonville team, obviously at home, they haven't been as good. Obviously beating Atlanta and Buffalo both in London, but they were able to stay out there, so that is big. So this is the first time that they've been back on American soil in a few weeks. But for me, this was a little bit of a tougher game, but I think Jacksonville, now that they're back in America, back at their home stadium, it's essentially been 3 home games in a row for them. I do think they are going to take it, but this Colts team is going to give them a tough game for sure.
Oh, 100%. This was up there for me for potential game of the week. Because this is going season battle for first place in the AFC South right here. You got the Jags and the Colts, a surprising Colts team. Even without Richardson, Minshew has come in and he's looked good, which doesn't really surprise us too much because we've seen him do that throughout his career thus far. And with how this Colts team is performing, he just has to play mistake free. And they also are getting Jonathan Taylor back now, so their run game could be even better, which that that's saying a lot because Zach Moss up to this point
Has looked
has
amazing.
already been good for them, and so to potentially have that as now a 1-2 punch, it's it was tough to pick this game, but I think it's you know as I've said with a lot of games this season, it's gonna come down to the running backs. It's Travis Etienne versus Jonathan Taylor, and I think Etienne is just he's firing on all cylinders right now. He's looked good every week in, week out. Like in my opinion, he's making himself a case to be the number one running back at the end of this season. He has been that good so far. If he can keep this trending that way, there's no reason that he shouldn't be considered that. Um, and being at home, I do think the Jags will be able to pull off a tight victory, but this is going to be a hard fought game. The Jags have struggled with the Colts a lot over the years, so this is a monkey they got to get off their back.
Especially
This
in
is
Jacksonville.
exactly, this is sort of that last hurdle that they really have to clear to solidify themselves as the potential number one in this division going forward where the other teams are chasing them. So this really is a must win for Jacksonville for their morale and for their momentum going forward. So I am going to pick them because it's such a must win, and I think Doug Peterson knows that, and he's going to really drill that into these guys this week and try to make sure that Trevor Lawrence is on the ball and not making mistakes. You can't turn the ball over in this game. If Trevor Lawrence turns the ball over, this is going to turn the other way on them very quickly. But
Yeah,
ultimately, yes,
Mm-hmm.
Jags. I think we agree.
Yeah, no, and for me, just the Jags, it just kind of feels like going back to exactly what you're saying. It just feels like it's a
Hmm.
must-win game for them just to keep that morale up, or otherwise this can start to spiral into not a losing season for the Jags, but just a season where everyone was going like, man, you were supposed to walk away with this division. You were
Hmm.
supposed to be maybe not a Super Bowl contender, but a team that is having really good aspirations in the playoffs of maybe
Well,
potentially making an AFC championship game or like that.
that's just it. Like we expect them to be a playoff team, and a loss here really hurts that chance because with how much this AFC South is, looking to be on par with each other. The records are all within a game of each other right now, and it's looking like it's going to be a 9-8 team winning that division, and everybody else is going to be on the outside looking in. So this is really a division where you have to win it to get to the playoffs, and a loss here is going to severely hurt those chances because they're going to then have to go and play in Indianapolis later this season.
Yeah, both of us picking the Jacksonville Jaguars here. The New Orleans Saints taking on fellow AFC South Division team Houston Texans, who have looked a lot better this year than what a lot of people thought. CJ Stroud is doing pretty much exactly what I thought he was going to do in the NFL. Again, going back to draft time, I said CJ Stroud was the better quarterback because I know you don't like your Ohio State quarterbacks, but the two Ohio State quarterbacks that are currently in the NFL right now that are starters are both looking really, really good at the moment. And it's just
Hmm.
more or less a coaching thing. But CJ Stroud has looked so good this year. Obviously, you got to see it up close and personal when he tore apart your Pittsburgh Steelers defense in that game. But I think they're going up against a really, really tough opponent in the New Orleans Saints. Derek Carr, I believe he's healthy enough to play this game. But I do think even if they don't have him in there, it's probably going to be one of those sloppy games. Like New Orleans has a really good defense. They are playing really, really well. So that's really going to be the key for me in this one is that the New Orleans Saints defense is going to be really, really tricky. But I could easily be convinced that Houston could take this one as well, just because it is at Houston and CJ Stroud has been playing so well this year.
Yeah, see, I'm in agreement. This was a tough one to pick, and like I'm leaning Saints. Just because that defense has looked so good. My big concern comes from how easily they handled the Patriots last week. Are they going to come in with too big of a head, thinking they're going to be able to do the same thing to CJ Stroud that they did to Mac Jones, and CJ Stroud's going to expose them in the same way he did that Steelers defense? That is where my concern lies. But it wasn't enough for me to lean towards that Texan side. So much like yourself, I am picking the Saints to win this one on the road. That defense has just looked really good, and I expect it to be a tight game. I don't know how well CJ Stroud's going to be able to, manufacture those game-winning drives. Whereas on the other side, we've seen Derek Carr and Jameis Winston, whichever one of them happens to be in the fourth quarter, they both are capable of orchestrating those game-winning drives if it's needed. And so I do think the Saints defense is just going to keep rolling as they need to because they've got to keep pace with this Bucks team that has been just lights out so far this year.
Yeah, right now it looks like it's going to be Derek Carr. He's not showing up on an injury report from what I am seeing.
Hmm.
So, yeah, for me, that just makes it a little bit more concrete that I'm going to pick the Saints. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, not a lot of difference between us this week, which usually at this point we have two or three differences. But
Well,
next
we
game,
did had two earlier, and you swayed me on one of them.
yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
But speaking of the New England Patriots, the team that you were mentioning on that just had that brutal loss to the Saints last week, they go into Vegas and take on the Raiders. Man, this team, they have scored 3 points in the last 8 quarters of football, and they have allowed almost 100 on the opposite side. Against Dallas, they allowed 38, and against New Orleans, they allowed 34. Mac Jones has been benched twice in each of those games, and they it's a alarm bells ringing in Boston right now, where this team just
Hmm.
does not look good. The Raiders, they're coming in with a little bit more confidence after beating that Green Bay Packers team, which always puts a smile on my face, and that's going to be a nice little discussion for a little bit later too. But um, I just think right now the Raiders they're just kind of riding this little bit of confidence, and of course, Mike McDaniel's he is going to want to show up his former squad and say to Bill Belichick, listen, it's like I got the better team, I'm the better coach right now, and my team's gonna beat yours, but with just the way that the Patriots have been playing, it's hard to pick them. Obviously, once we're finished our picks up here, we'll get to talk about our top and bottom, and you know, uh, maybe it's a spoiler, maybe it's not, but maybe the Patriots are in my bottom five. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're in your bottom five. But right now, I do have the Raiders winning this one.
Yeah, I'm not liking the trend of this week of me having to pick teams that I really don't like to win games. I picked the Ravens, I picked the Bengals, and here I am picking the Raiders as well. Um, but yeah, I am happy to see that this Patriots team has fallen off the cliff finally, because I spent over a decade being tortured by Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, and I freaking hated it. So I'm glad to see them struggling now and looking like a dog shit organization again. Um, but yeah, like really, this is a game where the Patriots should have just stayed home, called the league, and been like, you know what, just give the Raiders
Yeah, allow them to have this bye week
for
and just
this.
give them that
Like
extra
they're
win.
gonna get destroyed. Devonte Adams, like right, exactly. Devonte Adams, I know he was looking like he might be a little questionable earlier in the week, but I think he'll be playing, and I think he's looking at the record books for this game. Like he's looking at this, going, "Oh man, I could break some records, either receiving yards, receptions, touchdowns, something. I could put my name up there for sure."
I'm
Uh,
I'm definitely
and the
looking
Raiders,
forward to watching Devonte Adams put up records.
yeah, against the Patriots, I think he's got a good chance this weekend. And the Raiders are, as you said, coming off a big win against the Packers team that nobody expected them to win. Everybody thought the Packers were going to go in there and dismantle them, and it was a tight, well fought game, and they managed to pull out the victory. I don't think they're going to have as much struggles this week. The Saints beat the Patriots, what, 34 to nothing last week.
Yeah.
I expect, fairly similar score this week from the Raiders. Max Crosby's probably looking at this as well, going, "Oh man, I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna eat up this running back and quarterback duo, and it's gonna be a fun day for the Raiders fans in Las Vegas."
Yeah, for them, they're looking at this going like, yeah, we could get used to this dominating, other teams, but unfortunately,
Hmm.
they've again the Packers team. I'm gonna have a fun little talk about that in a little bit, but moving forward to the Arizona Cardinals heading into Los Angeles to take on the Rams, and this is one of those games where the Rams, they're a weird team this year, where they've
Hmm.
played some decent football and they've beaten both the Seahawks and the Colts, but they just it's so weird for me when just looking at this team, but I am ultimately going to choose the Rams to win this just because it feels like this is a game that they should win. They're at home going up against a division rival. The Cardinals aren't amazing this year, but they have shown a lot of fight and a lot of effort.
Hmm.
But I just don't think the Cardinals are going to have enough to get past the Rams this week, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Cardinals deal with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp in that offense. And man,
Hmm.
it's going to be the Rams saying, you know what, this can be a little bit of a momentum builder for us moving forward if they can get this win. But I think it's going to be a closer game than what some people expect, but I am ultimately going with the Rams.
Yeah, I think it'll it'll depend on which Josh Dobbs we get. It could be a close game if he's playing really well, but it's going to be tough for him to do that because they are now missing James Conner. Conner
Yeah.
is out for them. He went on IR as well. And so, as good as this Cardinals team has looked, we saw what happens when they don't have James Conner on the field last week against the Bengals. And I think that's just going to continue. We're finally going to start seeing the Cardinals team we thought we were going to see to start the year, because they don't have that monster in a running back to shoulder the team and carry them down the field. And we now get to see week 2 of Cooper Cup, Puka Nakua. I think we'll see a little bit better chemistry. They won't be getting in each other's way as much. This could be a big breakout game for the Rams offense. I'm kind of hoping it is, and it sort of inflates their ego for when my Steelers go in there next week and we can, deflate that on them. But I do think the Rams will win this. It is an important game for them within the division. They need a win here because, there's no chance they're winning the division. They need to start stacking up some wins if they want a playoff spot in a wild card, because there's no way you're making it. You're not topping the Giants. Or the Niners, sorry.
I was gonna say you're gonna top the Giants,
Yeah, I went to baseball there. That was my problem. Yeah.
Baseball playoffs currently in full swing, getting into the finals for each of the. Yeah, so got you on the mind. Didn't take you for a baseball guy, but
the way you're catching the Niners. Yeah, the Rams. This is a must-win. I think we're gonna see a fun game for Kupp, Nakua, and Matthew Stafford as well.
Yeah. Now moving forward, where we see the Eagles going into New York to take on the Jets. And if you were to ask me this question, who do you think would win this game week 3, I would have instantly been like, Eagles, no question, no doubt. But this Eagles team, man, they're undefeated, but there is something fundamentally wrong with the way this team is playing. Obviously, Darius Slay is out. Jalen Carter is out, their star rookie D tackle. And you know what? The Jets, yes, they might have been. They're a roller coaster, man. Like they'll be out there. Obviously, they won against the Bills. They fell flat on their face against Dallas and New England. They shocked KC in that loss and then beat Denver. But you looked at just looking at what was that team and Zach Wilson against Denver. Yes, they won the game, but they didn't do it in spectacular fashion. And it's going to be really for this Jets team, how does their defense show up against the Eagles, and what Zach Wilson are we getting? Are we getting the Zach Wilson that we saw against Buffalo and that we saw against KC, or are we getting the Zach Allen that we saw against Denver, Dallas, and the Patriots? And it's just kind of one of those things where the Eagles, I am picking them to win, but man, there's just been something wrong and off with this team this year, and I could pretty easily see the Jets at home looking at the Eagles going like, yeah, you might be undefeated, and we know that our season right now has just been so turbulent. It's been a Jets-like season, but we have an amazing defense and a quarterback that might give us the chance to win. And with them having their number one corner out, and not necessarily their number one D tackle, but a superstar in the making out this week, this was for me a trickier game than I initially expected it to pick.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find it too tricky to pick, but I do think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring than we initially would have thought. With no Slay, no Carter, it's going to afford the Jets some opportunities to put some extra points on the board. Of course, the Jets also are missing Breece Hall, so that's one of the key running backs that's going to be down and out. I don't have as much faith in Zach Wilson. Even that week 1 win against the Bills, that was more the Bills handing them the game than the Jets winning the game. The only real outlier that I see is that Chiefs game where it was, we were watching more of the Aaron Rodgers and Taylor Swift show that night than we were watching football, and that almost benefited Zach Wilson because he's like, hey, nobody's watching, I can just do whatever I want, and it worked out for him.
Well, he looked good in that game. Like to say
it's
Zach Wilson didn't look good, yeah.
No, that was the one game he did look good. That's what I'm saying.
No, I get that.
And it's almost like it's because the cameras were all on somebody else and not on him.
Yeah.
Whereas he's not going to have those distractions necessarily this week, unless Aaron Rodgers is in MetLife Stadium, then maybe that'll take some of that pressure off him. But ultimately, I just don't think they're going to have enough push to be able to beat this Eagles team. Like the Eagles likely will let the Jets hang in this till the end. We've seen them do it with a couple teams this season, including the Commanders, who have not looked good. And so I do expect it to be sort of similar to that. But ultimately, this team, as you know, as many problems as we've seen them have that we can't quite describe what it is or what's going on there, they know how to close games. And that DeAndre Swift has just looked lights out, and we can't forget all the weapons that are there. Devonta Smith has had some lights out games as well. AJ Brown has had some big games, and that's just it. They only need one of these guys to really step out, and they get the win because of it. And then you factor in the good old Eagles tush push. As
The
long as they're
brotherly
getting down
shove.
and yeah, like they get down to that 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, they're going to be able to extend the plays. And ultimately that's going to tire out the Jets defense. It's going to wear them down, and it's going to lead to the Eagles eventually picking up the win. I don't have any doubt that the Eagles will win. It just might be a little bit sloppy to get there.
Yeah, fair. But now moving over to the final 2 o'clock game, or the 2:30 game, where we have the Lions going down to Tampa and taking on the Buccaneers. And Sterling, give us your thoughts on this one, buddy.
This is my other potential game of the week. We got two former number 1 overall picks going up head to head. Neither of them with the team that picked them. They've both had a tumultuous career. One traveled around a lot more than the other one, but they both have had really seasons. I haven't watched as much as Baker Mayfield, obviously, because I'm not a big Baker guy. I'm not sold on him, so I haven't watched the Bucks much. I have watched a lot of the Lions, and really, like, Jared Goff looks so good, and a large part of that is due to how well David Montgomery is running the ball, because this offense is so centered around this play action run game, and it, he's I haven't seen a guy that can roll play actions like this since Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning. Like, he looks like he's coming up in their shadow, and he's going to be the next great sort of play action quarterback that we're going to see for the next 2, 3, maybe 4 years. And this Detroit Lions team, they're sort of getting some wind back while getting some wind knocked out. Sam Laporte is dealing with a bit of a hamstring injury. He stepped up the last couple weeks with Amon-Ra St. Brown being out with the abdomen, but St. Brown is back this week. He had full practice yesterday. He's looking good. And so with Sam Laporta being down, they still have that great weapon. And then the defense, this Lions defense has been, as I said at the start of the year, they struck me as one of the ones that could rise up and be one of the best defenses, and they are doing that. Week in, week out, they are showing everybody in America why the Lions are now the top dog in the NFC North. As much as that pains you to hear and confuses everybody else to hear, nobody ever thought they'd be hearing that about the Lions.
Funny enough, the
Dan
team that
Campbell.
they're facing has won an NFC
Mhm.
North championship in more recent history than the Lions.
Right? I know, it's crazy to think about, but Dan Campbell has done amazing things in Detroit. Like, he is up there for me as a front runner, top 2 for coach of the year this year with what he's managed to do.
Has to be.
Um, it has to be, right? He has to be in consideration for sure. But outside of that, as I said, the Bucks have put some wins together. They've looked good, but they've looked sloppy as well at points. And so that's where, for me, I'm picking the Lions because they have consistently, week in, week out, on both sides of the ball, looked solid. They've had a bit of hiccups with injuries, but there's always a guy ready there to step in and take that. It's going to be tough not having Jahmyr Gibbs to throw in there to sprinkle in with David Montgomery, but Montgomery's been running downfield like a beast, and I he's unstoppable at this point. Like, he's getting a touchdown a game. I believe he's got 6 touchdowns up to this point over 5 games. And so you can pretty much pencil him in as a shoe-in to get a touchdown this game. Same with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I can't say the same about the Bucks. I see Mike Evans probably going to get a touchdown. Beyond that, Godwin maybe, and then it falls off. I don't know where else they're going to get scores from in Tampa. And so I do think the Lions are going to be able to go into Tampa Bay, play a really tough fought game. I mentioned it earlier, the Colts Jags was my game of the week. This was my runner up. This is the 2 o'clock game that I'm going to be watching because I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. It's going to be a lot of back and forth, and we're going to have a lot of big highlight plays from this game.
Yeah, I think the Lions right now, they not only are they showing that they're one of the best teams they're the best team in the NFC North, but they're showing they're one of the best teams in just period the NFC, where they're going to have to go up against the Eagles and they're going to have to go up against the 49ers. And to me, this Lions team, as much as it disgusts me to say that they're good, they're great. They're amazing, and what they've been doing with Ben Johnson as their offensive coordinator, they have just been firing on all cylinders. They have looked really, really good. I think they're gonna go into Tampa Bay and they're going to look at this Baker Mayfield led Bucks offense and go, "You don't scare us." Like it's probably gonna be closer than like a 14-point game. I don't know the spread in this one, but I think it's probably going to be like a 7-8 point game, maybe a one score. But I think the Bucks, they're going to struggle against this Lions team, and particularly the Bucks defense. And I'm not sure what the offense is going to look like because Baker Mayfield has really kind of found his home with the Buccaneers, and I think this has probably been the best situation that he's been a part of, and a team that is actually giving him full support, and he's looked really good this year. But
He has, yeah.
they have stumbled for sure, but I just think the Lions, this is just simply a team that is just firing on all cylinders, going up against a team that has been better than a lot of people thought, but is still not an unbelievable team. But now going to our Sunday night football game of the week, where we see the New York Giants heading up to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And I'm going to ask you this question like I did twice before. How quickly did you pick the Buffalo Bills?
I didn't even look at who the Giants were playing, and I picked the Giants to lose. Like that. That's how bad the Giants have been. They started out with high hopes this year, signed their quarterback that everybody was confused why they gave him so much money. Saquon Barkley's been having injury troubles this year, which was ultimately, I suppose, their concern about paying him. So maybe it was the right decision to not pay him. But really, this Giants team is collapsing fast, and they're headed towards a rebuild that they're not going to be able to even begin for a couple more years because you've got to get Daniel Jones out of there first.
Yep.
Bills are going to feast on Sunday night. Josh Allen in prime time, man, he comes to perform when he plays prime time. The Bills are going to embarrass them. I think they're going to look to put up a 50 spot on the Giants. I can't see any good. I'm not even sure if Daniel Jones is going to be playing, to be honest with you.
He's out.
So, I mean,
it's Tyrod Taylor as their starting quarterback going into this game.
Well, and Tyrod Taylor is going to be doing his usual running for his life.
Yeah.
It's the Bills are just it's unfortunate to see the Giants in primetime so much. It was like last season watching the Broncos in primetime every week, and it's like, man, these guys are trash. This is a boring game because it's just watching one team score and then the other team do nothing. It's unfortunate. These are the types of games where we need Taylor Swift there, something else to look at because the Giants are so horrible to see.
And it's just of course, it's on Sunday Night Football too, which is the worst crew of all the primetime games. And obviously, if you want to hear my rant about that, go check out last week's episode. But that just makes it even worse. I'm happy I don't have to watch this game because I'll be working. But it's one of those things where it's like, man, that is such a bad game because the Bills, like Josh Allen, he's gonna go out there, he's gonna feast, and this Giants team has just been quitting on itself. They've been running around going like, you know what? Like they've given up on the season. That's what the players have looked like here at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a good look.
No.
But now
No,
move.
and you feel for a couple of the players, because there's a couple of really talented guys there, like especially on defense with Kayvon Thibodeau. You feel for him because he's such a great talent and he's got nothing else there to help him win games. So
Him and
he
Dexter
can,
Lawrence.
right? You can only do so much when you're one guy or two guys. So you hope for those guys that at some point, if this Giants team can't find a way to put a winning squad on the field, they find somewhere else to go and play that they can feel good about themselves.
Yeah, yeah. But now moving into Monday Night Football, where we see the Dallas Cowboys, go into Los Angeles and take on the Rams after a very, very disappointing defeat against the San Francisco 49ers, which I believe was on Sunday Night Football last week. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Cowboys get
yeah.
back-to-back primetime games, this time facing off against the Chargers, who have come off of a bye, so they've been able to get a little bit healthier, and they're coming off of back-to-back wins against the Vikings and Raiders. Um,
hmm
Taking a look here at some of the injury reports, Joey Bosa questionable, Nick Williams is questionable, but they appear to be healthier at the moment, and Justin Herbert also, he is no longer on the injury report, so everything is looking good.
hmm
But this Chargers team, they're just too up and down, and as much as I hate to say it, I think the Cowboys are going to get a bounce back win this week, and they're going to look at it and go, you know what, this is a team that struggled. But on the flip side of that, Keelan Moore, who was their offensive coordinator last year in Dallas, got kicked to the curb because Mike McCarthy doesn't know how to, do anything. He's a bad coach, and he just threw all the blame at the young man. Went over to the Chargers. He might call a very, very good game for this Chargers offense. They saw what worked with San Francisco and said, we are going to try to emulate that. But there's just this feeling where this is going to be, I feel like it's going to be kind of a heavyweight prize fight where these two teams are just going to strike each other back and forth, back and forth. And I think it's probably going to be a very, very exciting game of football to watch. But ultimately, I think Dallas is going to come out on the edge just because I think they have the better defense.
That's fair. I mean, we thought it was going to be a more competitive game last week. We knew the Niners would win, but we thought it would be. We didn't think we'd be watching Sam Darnold close out the game. Like
Boy, do you love to
that
see it,
had to.
though.
Hmm?
Boy, you love to see it, though.
Right. And honestly, for that reason, like I look at this Chargers team, and they are, like you said, they're on a 2-game win streak. They coming off a bye, coming off a massive game from Khalil Mack. 6 sacks in one game, and I think he's going to be looking to add to that. Dak Prescott has not looked sharp. He's looked like we expected. We're starting to wonder, is it Trey Lance time in Dallas? Is it Cooper Rush time in Dallas? Like somebody, get out there and take a crowbar to Dak Prescott's ankle so that they can get him out of there and maybe they can win. Because I don't have faith in Dallas. Their defense is still great. But, I mentioned earlier how I picked up the Dolphins defense streaming this week. It was the Cowboys defense I dropped because this Chargers offense is lights out. And it's the defense for LA that is questionable. I don't have any questions about the offense. They're going to put up 30, 35, maybe 40 points against this Dallas team, and that's against a good Dallas defense. I still believe the Chargers will be able to do that, and I don't have faith that the Cowboys are going to be able to put up that many points and that they're going to be able to hang with this Chargers team, especially if they get behind early. That's going to be the big key. If they fall behind early and they're in passing downs repeatedly, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, they are going to feast on this Dallas offense, and we may see another 4 or 5 sack game for Khalil Mack. Like, dude put up so much in one game. Like, he only has to do that 3 more times. He breaks the sack record. Granted, the current sack record, which I think will already be broken by the end of this year, I have no faith in Dallas. They started their collapse early, and it's just going to continue. This is the Eagles division now, and it's the rest of the teams. Dallas is going to have some games throughout the year. I don't think this is it.
No.
They got beat up so bad by the Niners last week, and I think the Chargers are going to do the same thing this week. And um, I don't even see Dallas being able to bring this within a score by the end of the game. Like, the Chargers are going to be 10 to 14, 17-point favorites, in my opinion.
The only reason that I choose Dallas is because when I look at head coach Brandon Staley
Mm-hmm.
for the Chargers, he puts his team in such poor positions so often that for me, I need to see the
Mm-hmm.
Chargers go up against a team that is better than what I think you're ultimately giving them credit for, but I need to see them go out there and not make those mistakes from a head coaching standpoint. And for me, that's kind of the biggest reason why I still have Dallas here at the moment, is just because I need to see the
Mm-hmm.
Chargers get out of their own way. Because that is ultimately what their biggest issue is, that they're not getting out of their own way. Yeah, they might be on a 2-game win streak, but they did it against the Vikings, who are one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they did it against the Raiders, who are a division rival, who also aren't that great.
No, that's fair. I understand that, and they do. They shoot themselves in the foot often, but they still do that while putting up
A
30
ton of
plus
points.
points.
No, yeah,
I
which I
just don't have faith in the Dallas offense to be able to do that. Because outside of CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard, Dak Prescott has just not looked good.
look
You know,
bad.
Honestly, if it was Cooper Rush in there, I'd be more inclined to pick the Dallas Cowboys at this point because Dak
I hear you.
Prescott just does not look good.
Fair. But moving over to the Thursday night football game, as we typically do, where we get to see Jacksonville taking on New Orleans, and this is going to be a really interesting games. And you and I always talk when we do these games, where it's like it's really annoying to try to choose and pick a game a week in advance when we still haven't seen these two teams play this week. But I'm in New Orleans. I'm gonna go with the Saints on this one, just because I have a little bit more faith in their defense, and Jacksonville has just been so up and down roller coaster. Even though I think they are going to ultimately win this week, I just think that Saints team, they're just a little bit more consistent here at the moment, better defense, and yeah, for me, I am going with the Saints.
Yeah, this was a tough one again for the same reasons, but I looked at it in terms of whatever happens this week. The Saints, win or lose, are likely going to go into next week's game the same way. Looking at it the same way. The Jags, if they win this week, I think it starts a bit of a run for them, and they'll be able to beat the Saints next week. But at the same time, if they lose this week, I think it's going to put a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to go into New Orleans and they're going to win next week. So either way, I do think the Jags are going to beat the Saints next week. Looking at the start of the season, Trevor Lawrence was one of the only quarterbacks I looked at that I was like, I think he's got a good chance against this Saints defense. A lot of the others, I had a feeling the Saints defense would have their number. I think Trevor Lawrence, combined with how well Etienne has looked running the ball this year, I think the Jags win next week on Thursday night against the Saints.